So, how do I secure an employer-sponsored visa? So these are just some good tips. Some of them are quite obvious, but they're worth mentioning. So if you're at this point in time choosing an occupation to study, then again, refer to the medium list and see perhaps if you can choose an occupation or a course of study which aligns to an occupation on the medium to long-term list. Try and gain experience in the occupation whilst you are studying. Try and find an employer who will take you on and work part-time with them whilst you are studying. You can build a good rapport with your employer potentially that might lead you into an employer-sponsored pathway. Talk to your employer early on, perhaps not too early on, perhaps not at interview stage, but at some point in time, you need to broach the subject with your employer about employer sponsorship. It's no good working for an employer for 2 years on your postgraduate visa, for example, coming towards the end of that 2-year period and then asking your employer, would you consider sponsoring me? And they turn around and say, no, we've got a company-wide policy which we don't sponsor. You just wasted 2 years. So, whilst I say it's not potentially good to talk about at interview stage, perhaps it's not a bad idea to raise it, quite early on. I know I've had clients who have been working in occupations in demand, and they've had a number of interviews with a number of different employers, and they've had offers from a number of different employers, and they've put themselves in situations where they can actually negotiate their way into an employer-sponsored pathway down the line. So if you are in demand and you do have options, then this is the conversation that you should be having with your employer.
I think that's good advice, Sam, because a lot of job listings actually indicate there that they're not willing to sponsor at all. And a lot of international students, they apply anyway and they just think, oh, maybe after a year they'll really like me, they'll change their mind. But I don't think that's going to change, right? If they already said that they're not willing to sponsor you.
And quite often it's a policy which is set by human resources, because the HR department doesn't like doing visas because it's more work for them, basically. Yep. It's more work for them. It's more costly for them. They don't understand the process and they don't want to get involved. So they have this blanket approach, which is we don't sponsor. Sometimes you do change their mind. If you're a really good employee and you've got great skills, sometimes they'll make an exception to the rule. But yeah, often if that's the blanket policy, then that's what they're going to follow. So yeah, you shouldn't go in there blindly thinking, oh, maybe it'll work out for me later on. You should be well aware of what your likelihood of success is with a particular employer for sponsorship. And about not leaving it to the last minute, there's no benefit to you by not talking about this with your employer, especially if your employer does agree to it, and then we need at least 28 days to run the labour market testing and you've run out of that time. Then I talk to too many prospective clients who have an employer who do want to sponsor them, but their visa's expiring in 2 weeks' time and they've run out of time. So they've done themselves no favours whatsoever. And this is an important note. Help your employer understand what's involved. So perhaps do some research, talk to a migration agent, get some background information, take some information to your employer and say, well, I've done the research and this is what it's going to take and these are the costs, and help to educate your employer about what the process entails. Because often it's ignorance on the employer's part that means that they don't want to sponsor because they simply don't understand. So if you can do some of that legwork for them, or if your employer wants to speak to a migration agent, put them in touch with us. I'm quite happy to have conversations with employers and educate them on what's required on applying for an employer-sponsored visa. Consider working in a regional area or it's difficult for employers to find your skills. This might improve your chances of obtaining an employer-sponsored visa. And the added benefit of working in regional Australia is you have access to the 494 visa, which means that if you are working in a short-term list occupation, then you can still use the 494 as a pathway to permanent residency. It's kind of like a 482 for regional employers, so that you can then still access permanent residency further down the track.